name is Lance, and this is Amped About Aimpad. Thought I would give you an update on what we've been working on lately. The Cooler Master control pad is due out here in the next month or so if you backed it on Kickstarter, so we're excited about that. Should be a pretty exciting thing. We've been working on a few other things that I can't quite share yet that I'm getting prepared for CES here in a few months. Some new things that we've been working on, and but hopefully soon I can share some of that. The other thing that happened was a new product came on the market that has analog keys, and I was curious to see how it worked, what it was basically capable of doing. So let's go ahead and jump into my results of the experience I had with that device. So the first thing I like to do when evaluating an analog switch is to tear it apart. So that's exactly what I did. I wanted to see how this switch functioned physically and get a better understanding of what it can do. So from marketing material, what the developers of the switch basically identify is as you push the switch down, on the bottom part there's a green bar that indicates that a analog signal is increasing, and there's a red bar kind of in between that half of it's lit, and then as you push it down, more of it gets lit. I guess it's kind of an effective way to demonstrate it, but that's not really what's going on. So if you look closely at this switch, you can see there's kind of a silverish looking V shape here. And what's happening is that there is a light that's placed on one side of the switch and then a sensor on the other side of the switch that picks up how much light is being detected. So as you push the key down, that first part is a small part of the V, so little light's going through, and as you push it down, more light gets through, and more light all the way through. So I hooked up a red LED, and you can see in this video that the light will gradually get brighter and brighter the more I push that key down. So that is the analog range, or the signal that's actually occurring for that switch, and that's effectively how it's produced to get the analog signals. The switch itself is actually pretty decent. There's some nice features about it. It has the bars here on the left and right that will basically keep the switch very stable, so it doesn't wiggle around, and it's very consistent in that regard. It also is very smooth as you press it down, so it's good for the analog range and analog feel. Now, I tried the device first just to see if I could tell if it was good or bad, and right off the bat I could tell that the switch activated towards the top of the key press, which was great. It was a good thing. But as I pushed it down, some strange things started happening, and I knew that I had to do some data collection to try to get a better understanding of what's going on. So what I decided to do is, as I've done in previous videos, I take a digital height gauge and I'll basically set the switch right up to the digital height gauge, and I'll see that as soon as it gets to the very, very top of the key press, I'll mark that as 0. So I'll zero out every single key individually, because there's some tolerances between each key that they're not exactly the same. But basically, as soon as the key touches here, I'll start taking a measurement, and I'll push it down 0.2 millimeters, and this is all with the machine, and then take a measurement, and another 0.2 millimeters, another 2.1 millimeters, continue on all the way down through the 4 millimeter key press. So I get a good understanding of what analog signal occurs at each of those 0.2 millimeter key presses. So this is the result of the data. So you can see in this purple line here, that's the ideal. What you really want to see is starting at 0, if you want 0, and then it gradually increases at a linear rate all the way up to 4 millimeters. If you can get that type of signal, then you have my respect. Now, you can see this is actually the data. So I collected 20 different data lines for each individual switch, and there's 20 analog switches. So this represents the expectation, or what the values we get from each individual switch. So you can see at the beginning it starts off pretty well. Less than 0.5 millimeters, you can actually get some type of response or some type of analog signal, which is great. If you have less than 0.5 millimeters as a starting point for your analog data, that's really good in my book, and that deserves respect from that regard. But some things start to happen in a really bad shape as you press the key. So if after just pressing the key 1 millimeter, what you should be expecting is just a little bit over 0.2, or basically around 20% of the analog signal is what should be sent, but we're way up here in some regards. We're over 0.6 or 60% of the key press, or 60% of the analog value, after only pressing it down 1 millimeter. So that's not very much range. And then as you get just to 1.5 millimeters is when things start in most regards start to cap out above 80% of the way, and by 2 millimeters, pretty much all of them have all reached the 100% value. There's a few outliers here that probably are some QC issues or tolerance issues related to those specific ones, but in general, what you're expecting is this green line is what you should, or what I'm observing is that the average of each individual switch. So effectively, you have between around 0.5 millimeters to about 2 millimeters, or an effective 1.5 millimeter range. So those that use Freedom units, 1.5 millimeters, it's more like less than a 1/16 of an inch. It's very, very small amount of analog range. It's difficult alone to get good analog range across 4 millimeters, but just 1.5 to 2 millimeters is pretty sad. The other claim that the device has is the ability to control activation points. You could have one key activate two different key functions. So like, let's just say, for example, at the top of the press, you want it to make the letter A, and at the bottom of the key press, you want it to be the letter B. So according to marketing materials in the software, the expected values that they have set up for that is that the first activation point should occur at 1.5 millimeters, and the bottom would be 3.6. That's the effective range that they say in the software that you should be able to control, and that represents this black line here. So at 1.5 millimeter, the activation should happen for the first key press, that point, and then the second one should happen at 3.6. This is the data that I collected, where basically I would push the key down slowly until it gave the key response, and then record the measurement of the depth of that key press and where it occurred at each point. And so you can see this red line is the average. So on average, the first activation actually happened at around 0.4 millimeters, and the second activation happened at around 1.9. Again, that's a range of 1.5 millimeters of effective range. That's really, really small. So I think in general, the Switch could be greatly improved. It starts off really well, but then just because of the drastic analog range, it suffers from controllability. Obviously, the Aimpad solution has the full analog range because we place the sensor underneath the Switch, and you can get the full range based off of exactly where the Switch is. So clearly it's the way to go, but this is the results of the data that I've collected. Something else interesting that might be interesting to you is, according to the support page, it indicates which games are supported. They haven't done a whole lot of game support testing, but fortunately they say you can go to aimpad.com/compatibility for a full listing of other games, since I've spent hundreds of hours doing the tests on this type of technology to do it. So I guess that's kudos to me, maybe? I don't know. Speaking of games, I always like to end my videos with some type of gameplay using analog keys. So I'm going to focus now on the game Observer. Alright, so here we have a game called Observer. And Observer basically takes place in the future with a cyberpunk theme that's based around the concept of you being a detective, more or less, with the ability to see the world through modifications of your ocular system. So you can press Q and it will basically scan this vision with a mod that scans for organic components. Then you can press E, that will scan the world for electronics. So you can see wires and things like that in the world. And the world is a kind of a drab place and kind of a very cyberpunk feel to it. But the feeling of the game is more of a story-driven game, so the atmosphere is very important, the interaction with people is very important, but it's not heavily action-driven or things like that. So in these types of games, it's useful to have full analog control, and you can see as I move slowly, I can walk slowly in that direction and any direction based off of how far down I push the keys. So this game has excellent analog control, but it's helpful in this type of game where you don't want to be just in a normal keyboard mode where you're constantly moving at the same speed everywhere you go. The speed of this game is relatively slow to begin with, just using normal keyboard keys, but it's not like an action of this kind of jagged movement. If you switch back to normal analog movement, you have full control over moving slowly or fast, and that's pretty important. They also have a nice gameplay element that when you want to open a door, you click your mouse and you push it open with your mouse movement. So you push your mouse forward and that will open doors, and the same thing with like cabinets and things like that. So I click and then drag it towards myself and it will open this door. So movement and interaction with the world is very important in this type of game, and the developers have done a fantastic job here. So like I said, a pretty heavy emphasis on cyberpunk elements. So this person, I can press Q and you can see the body is outlined in red. So I'll scan this body to see what's going on. And it looks like life signatures are unstable. So what you can also do is scan for electronics, and you can see there's an electronic component embedded in this person's head. So what I can do is focus on it. And because it has a kind of an uplink, I can press the middle click button and it will link into this person. So I can see kind of what they're seeing or what they're experiencing by tying myself into them. So we'll see what's going on here. So I'm jacking into this other person so I can see what they've seen or what they're experiencing at this point. So now I'm inside this body of this person. You can see I've kind of moved out of this world inside their head, and they've experienced something different or weird. And you can see random things, and your objective is to try to observe the world through these different people to get an understanding of what's going on. And more of a backstory, you're kind of tied into this concept of being locked in this big hotel room, or a big giant hotel with a bunch of people in it. So I'm going to try to more explore this area and get a sense of what's going on.
It's best to accept it. There's nothing we can do now.
Rain, rain, go away.
Alright, so that's probably a good place to stop. I don't want to spoil anything about the game. I highly recommend checking out Observer. It's been an interesting and engaging game to play with an analog keyboard. If you like this video and would like to see more, go ahead and subscribe. Otherwise, thank you for watching.